All right, everybody, please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Get the meeting underway. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I do want to thank the hard work of the. Thanks. I want to thank the hard work of the tech department for getting the mics working. They had a bit of an issue earlier that they worked hard to resolve. We don't have any public comment. No department comment, nothing under there. Special event permit, 2026 SP. Consideration and possible approval of an application submitted by Stephanie Guillemetti to hold a special event at the Pines area on May 17th. Now, I thought we did this last.
So this is a different event.
Oh, nice.
This is an event in regards to honoring veterans, I believe, and the other event was in regards to a fundraising effort for the
Sweet Paws?
Well, that makes a lot of sense. So, do we have a motion?
Go ahead.
I have to recuse myself from this.
All right, then I'll do it. I'll make a motion to accept the special event permit 2026-SP6 for Stephanie Chuli Gilmet to hold a special event at the Pines Recreation Area on May 17th, 2026.
I'll second that. And since we have Ed over there on call, do we have any further discussion?
No.
Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Ed? For the permit?
No, I have no comment. Yes.
Yes, okay. Becky?
Yes.
Jason, yes. Steve? You're recused
I am
or abstained?
abstaining.
Abstained. So 3 yes, 1 absent, and 1 abstention. What do we have, John, here to give us a presentation? Oh, the next item? Recreational marijuana bylaw?
Yes. So at the last meeting, the select board had expressed interest in exploring alternatives to providing for the allowance of recreational marijuana here in the town of Groveland. We had originally had the Economic Development Committee provide a bylaw or an article for potential submission for the annual town meeting that included just manufacturing for recreational marijuana. At that meeting, we had discussion about trying to maybe potentially add retail recreational marijuana as an allowed use here in Groveland. I provided an outline that provided some additional information as to when the state originally passed or there was a state ballot question, then when we had our own question here in Groveland, and then also we did a prohibition at one point, and then we only allowed for medical marijuana. So it kind of went through all of those. So when the board had wanted to explore a retail option, we decided to bring in the town planner to put together some proposals for bylaw considerations for, again, the upcoming meeting. So we first have the one bylaw that just deals with the manufacturing, then we have the second bylaw, which just deals with the retail component, and then we have the third, which includes both the manufacturing and retail. And so I have John Sullivan here, who is our town planner conservation agent, to give a presentation on the bylaws that he has drafted and were included as part of your packet.
Awesome.
And I'm gonna put that up on the screen, so just bear with me, I don't know if I can get started.
The suspense, Rebecca. I'm kidding. It's fine. I know. No, I understand. Technology.
Walking you through my little steps here.
Nope, that's okay.
Sharing screen, presentation.
There we go.
Awesome.
Sorry.
No, you're good. I'll go ahead. Hello, everyone. For those of you whom I have not met, my name is John Sullivan. I am the town planner and conservation agent. The town administrator recently asked me to draft a proposed zoning bylaw for marijuana retail for your review, and I will be presenting that language tonight. So before we jump in, here's a brief overview of the presentation. I'll begin walking us through the purpose of the draft bylaw, the applicability, specific definitions relevant to the bylaw, which zoning districts this is applicable for, any general requirements for permitting, special permit requirements, and then wrapping it up with what happens if a use is abandoned or it's discontinued. So the purpose of the proposed bylaws is to provide for the regulation of both licensed recreational marijuana retail and non-retail marijuana establishments within the town of Groveland. So to be clear, I drafted two separate bylaws, one for recreational marijuana retail specifically, and a second for non-retail marijuana establishments. So think manufacturing, businesses, cultivators, things like that. My aim is to provide the select board with flexibility in considering the types of marijuana businesses permitted within Groveland. Both bylaws were modeled after the structure of Section 50-7.4, registered marijuana dispensaries within the current zoning bylaw. Under recreational retail, the draft regulations are intended to permit adult use retail establishments in the business and industrial zoning districts, minimize the adverse impacts on surrounding properties, residential neighborhoods, schools, playgrounds, and areas where minors congregate. Ultimately, the bylaws to ensure public health and safety, while also promoting equity consistent with the town of Groveland's cannabis social equity policy adopted by the select board in December 2023. Similarly, the draft non-retail establishment regulations are intended to permit marijuana uses other than retail in the industrial zone with similar aspects. So the purpose of this continued, under the Code of Massachusetts regulations, the Cannabis Control Commission considers marijuana retail as a marijuana establishment, along with, a marijuana cultivator, marijuana cooperative, product manufacturer, et cetera. Under the draft bylaw, though, I'm proposing separating marijuana retail from marijuana retail specifically for recreational purposes from marijuana establishments. And that's mainly so that, the select board has ultimate flexibility in adopting or passing any type of regulation with maximum flexibility on what is allowed in Groveland and what not. So if you guys decided to say, hey, we only want retail stores, we don't want manufacturing, you can only adopt the retail component and leave the manufacturing component. So that's that. For both, can you go to, thank you. For both recreational retail and non-retail establishments, the language is similar. It shall be unlawful for any person or entity to operate without first obtaining all required licenses and registrations from the Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission, in addition to all required permits from the town of Groveland. The retail, trade, or distribution of marijuana for recreational purposes is prohibited unless explicitly permitted under the proposed bylaw. Likewise, the cultivation, processing, manufacturing, testing, research, et cetera, is also prohibited unless explicitly permitted by the bylaw. No recreational retail or non-retail establishment shall be established except in compliance with the provisions of the proposed bylaw. And this is all boiler template language that I took from the dispensary section. So it's pretty consistent with the rest of the town of Groveland's bylaws. If we want to move forward to definitions. The definitions outlined in both of these sample bylaws are sourced from 935 CMR. The only definitions altered are marijuana retail and marijuana establishments, and that's to reflect Groveland's proposed bylaw in order to accommodate the separation of retail as a use from other uses, including under the marijuana establishment definition. The definitions outlined on this slide are paraphrased. They are pretty lengthy, so if you want to see the full text, please refer to the draft bylaw language. And then for zoning districts, the draft recreational marijuana bylaw proposes recreational retail in the industrial and business zones. As you can see from the map on the slide, the business zone largely falls along Main Street and Washington Street, and the industrial zone falls along Massachusetts Highway 97, also known as School Street. And then for non-retail establishments, the draft bylaw proposed uses marijuana manufacturing and cultivating are typically seen as more extensive and uses compared to retail. So the proposal is to just include those in the industrial zone. And then for general requirements, the slide outlines the general requirements for recreational retail. So all licensed recreational marijuana retail shall comply with the following. It will require a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals. The structure or the business must be contained within a fully enclosed structure. No products shall be visible from the outside of the building, no on-site consumption, no alcohol sales. You must be 21 years or older to be permitted on the premises, hours of operation. It just goes into the basic details of what the business is allowed to do and what it's not allowed to do. And this is pretty standard across various town bylaws and different rules and regulations. And then the general requirements for the non-retail establishments are very similar. All non-retail marijuana establishments shall comply with the following. They also shall require a special permit issued by the zoning board. No retail marijuana uses shall be, it should all be contained within a fully enclosed building. It touches on no fertilizers, chemicals, soils, et cetera, can be stored outside. No cultivating outdoors. It's pretty similar as well. The largest or the most important aspect I would say is for both retail and non-retail establishments. No establishment should be or shall be within 100 feet of a residence, and that is measured from building to building. I know our business zone is pretty tight, so that's why I opted for building to building instead of lot to lot. Whereas for schools, daycares, and playgrounds, it's 500 feet from lot line to lot line. And then moving on to the special permit, these are the requirements that will need to be met or evidence shall be provided from the applicant in order for the Zoning Board of Appeals to approve a special permit request. Both retail and non-retail establishments also undergo site plan review from the planning board. And you can both pursue the special permit and the site plan review concurrently. So that hopefully cuts down the application time for various reasons. A special permit for both retail and non-retail requires a host community agreement. That's also stipulated by the state as well. And other various requirements such as description of the status of the applicant's application with the Cannabis Control Commission, a list of any waivers sought from the commission, copies of the establishment's policies and procedures, evidence of right to use the proposed facility that they want to locate in, things like that. Also security plans, and finally, I want to touch on that the special permit is limited to the duration of ownership and, or the lease, and it's not transferable. And that's applicable to both the retail and the non-retail establishments. And I kind of covered this with the previous slide as well. And so, so a special permit, it shall lapse after 3 years if an individual has not shown concrete reasoning or a good excuse, if you will, as to why they haven't, started operating or started construction. And that's pretty similar to other special permit language throughout the bylaw. Also, retail and non-retail establishments shall be required to remove any and all material, products, paraphernalia, signage prior to surrendering their license to the state or within 6 months after it closes. So, are there any questions?
The only thing that I want to just make sure everybody's clear on is the select board won't be adopting these. This all would have to go through town meeting. That's the only thing I wanted to say, but Ed, you got any questions?
What are the advantages for the town of Groveland?
Yeah, I would say that it ultimately comes down to tax revenue. So not only do towns get a percentage of I think it's the retail sales, but also you can have up to 3% for impact fees up to 5 years as well. So.
Give me an estimate of the tax dollars.
I don't have those numbers in front of me. I apologize.
So we did provide a memo to the board that took into consideration the additional revenue that was generated in the neighboring town over in Merrimack. And I'm just trying to pull up the outline now, but I believe it was close to, so in FY 2024, when the first store opened in May, they had generated an additional $30,000 in tax revenue. And in fiscal year 2025, that had grown to $50,000. And that is for the local option to tax up to 3%, which is an additional revenue stream for municipalities.
Anything else, Ed?
No, but just take note that Merrimack has a facility where you can go in and purchase it. So that those figures would be based on that, I think.
Yeah, standard retail store.
They have a dispensary there in Merrimack.
Okay, Becky?
Well, first, thank you so much for putting that together. I really appreciate it, and I think it's nice having that separated out to give that flexibility. One point I wanted to make, it was actually an article I read this morning, that the Cannabis Control Commission voted last week to schedule a public hearing on a potential freeze of new cultivation licenses. So I think I've been very transparent about being on board with cultivation and retail, but I think this helps further the idea of retail because cultivation may be on hold for a little bit. I mean, I can bring up some of the points from before, but I won't bore you too much, but just thinking about fiscal responsibility, neighboring towns are already benefiting from this, and that could be revenue we could have without raising property taxes. Cannabis consumption is already happening in Groveland, but right now we're exporting both economic activity and tax revenue that could be staying here. These cannabis businesses operate similar to package stores, a lot more rules to follow, but with higher financial returns. And we do have package stores that sell alcohol. So this isn't about opening floodgates. I think that's important too. There are retail stores in all of our neighboring towns, so it's not the way it was before, where I think they were looking for towns to be in. But Rebecca, you had mentioned were there two retail cannabis businesses that came to Groveland, just off of recollection?
There was at least two had inquired
Right.
as to whether or not they were allowed.
Right. So as like a select board member who's trying to think about ways to increase revenue, that is disappointing that we had to turn it down for something that's so heavily regulated, and we can be very thoughtful with our approach for it. So overall, I'm just looking for the select board to maybe support the bylaw for retail, as well as cultivation, to think about long-term impacts and the way we can strengthen Groveland's financial future. That's all I had.
Steve?
I just have a couple of questions. I know back in September, I think we got a memo from somebody about the social consumption laws that they were considering, and I think what I read is correct. Back in December, the Cannabis Control Commission approved those regulations. Do we have to factor that into the bylaw, or can we exclude that? Or what, just maybe elaborate on that and how closely it was followed as part of this?
So when we had an initial conversation and John came to me and asked for some additional clarity on exactly what it was he was being charged with, we had kind of gone back and forth about how that was something that was recently done, and we received that memo from Mead, Talaman and Costa, who's our town council, just to inform us of the recent regulatory changes. It's not something that we have to include.
Okay.
So we kind of went back and forth. It's still relatively new. A lot of communities are still kind of adjusting to how that would work, the process in which it would work. We've seen, and we looked at examples in Somerville, I believe John pointed to specifically, but again, it's a different type of atmosphere, it's a different type of setting. In Groveland, we don't necessarily have a lot of restaurants, we don't really have that type of scene. So we figured that where other towns are still exploring on how that would look, that we would just focus on the actual retail component and the recreational non-retail manufacturing, I'm never gonna get that right, component. And then if at a later date, or if the board through this conversation would like to see that, John had taken the liberty of putting together some language that we could include. But again, without having to really see exactly how it was playing out in some of those other mainstream communities, we were kind of hesitant to include it in the draft presented. So I kind of asked him to leave it out.
That makes sense. I just wanted to make sure if we were to move forward or suggest moving forward with allowing recreational marijuana, that we didn't then subsequently have to allow that other regulation as well,
That is
On-premise
my-
consumption?
on-premise
That
consumption.
is my understanding, but John was the one who looked into it in more detail, so I don't want to misspeak if you saw that.
Yeah. So I cited a statute on one of the slides, but essentially, like, the state defers to local control for what is allowed and what isn't. And as long as the bylaw specifically states, which I did include language, that nothing other than permitted shall be permitted, so.
Perfect. Thank you. That's all I have.
That's it. I have a question in terms of how detailed the bylaw should be in terms of the fertilization overspill on the interior of the building and how that gets recycled and repurposed. Whether or not they're required to have a drain, or is that something that the planning board would decide at the time of construction of the building or going over the plans.
That is a possibility. We could also include it in the bylaw. Again, you can get as detailed as you want. So I did not specifically include any language requiring a drain or any type of regulations for the inside of the structure. But if that's something that you think is a good idea, it could definitely be discussed.
I think it might be good. I think it probably would be good to have the planning board weigh in on that, because they have a lot more experience with that, especially in terms of things running off and dealing with that. So I'd like to see them have their input and take on that. And you come up with another question?
Yeah, I did, actually. Right,
Go ahead.
I can wait.
Oh, I'm done.
The other question I had was in terms of the special permit, have we thought about what that would I assume we can charge for those special permits. Have we looked at what that fee structure might look like?
I have not specifically, but we do charge for other special permit applications.
Right, that
So
might be
it would be
something that
similar, I would
Just
assume.
good to understand.
And we just need to make sure it is compliant with our social equity
Yep.
policy, because that's where they try and be very clear about making sure that there are those that can apply and are not disenfranchised.
Sure. Understood. Thank you.
Ed, did you come up with any other questions?
Yes. Any idea how much water this growth facility would take? Obviously, growing that product takes a lot of amount of water. What,
Ed, you're breaking up real bad. Have you looked at the water consumption of a cultivation plant in terms of how much water they would typically consume?
I have not, no.
Again, that might be something that the planning board would want to talk about and have a conversation with the water department. It's difficult, I mean, cultivation, we allow farms.
Can you hear me, Jason?
Now you're coming through clear. And you disappeared.
I haven't said anything.
Oh, okay. So did you hear me phrase that question? About the water cultivation?
Yes, I heard that. So we don't know how much the water usage on that at this point.
No. It's definitely worth exploring. I don't know, I don't imagine it's gonna be extensive, but I could be wrong. We won't find out unless we explore it, so.
So as far as we're concerned, we just need to know, and this can wait, obviously, but we need to know next steps. Would you like for this to go forward as part of the review process? Technically, any type of zoning change needs to go before the planning board. It needs to be advertised. There is a process, and then it would be presented at the annual town meeting for a vote by the voters. So not sure if you would like to make that decision this evening, or if you'd like to wait for your next meeting, but from our perspective, you asked, you delivered, so unless there's any changes or amendments you'd like to make, and again, that doesn't mean that what you're reviewing tonight is the final version. As part of the planning board process, there's more of a public dialogue with a public hearing, so that we can look at the language. We can also, and always do, send it over to town council to make sure town council has had a thorough review and make sure that everything complies. So the language is not final, and we're not asking you to vote on final language, but we are asking to see if you would like us to move forward with retail marijuana or non-retail recreation marijuana being manufacturing, or if you would like us to combine it and have one that allows for both. Again, does not have to be this evening, but we need some direction from the board, or this will continue to be tabled until you choose to take it up again.
Yes, and this is in the hopes to bring it to the town meeting this year, so the townspeople can have an opportunity to actually vote on this, whether or not they want it or don't want it, based on what we figure. And if we can't work out the language, we still have the option of not putting it through this year. It's just a matter of pushing it forward so we can get the language, so we can make something informed for the townspeople to make a really good informed decision on what they have. Myself, I don't see a tremendous amount of retail coming here, but I could be wrong. I don't know the market. I mean, I think it's pretty saturated. But I think some of these things lead to a more business-friendly environment where people might hopefully choose to do business with Groveland and inside of Groveland, which I think is important. So, yeah, I think if somebody wants to fly a motion, we can.
So I'll make a motion that we move forward with at least going through the process. I'd like to see the combined retail and non-retail. So that'll be the motion that I'll make, is that we explore with the next steps with the planning board and other related parties to look at presenting a more polished bylaw.
I'll second that.
Motion is second. Any further discussion?
Yeah, just a point of information. The town brought this up. We should be sending it back to them for another vote. They voted it down. We should respect their vote. And I can't support this at this time. Like I said before, marijuana is a gateway drug. It's still against federal laws to be possessing it. You can't fly on a commercial airline with marijuana. So I'm a big no on this. Supporting the town people they've voted before.
Absolutely. Any other discussion? And I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Oh, you have to do a roll call?
Oh, yeah, roll call. Ed?
Negative, no.
Becky?
Yes.
Jason, yes. Steve?
Yes.
So we will work to consolidate and create one bylaw. We will then submit that to you as correspondence or an agenda item, but we will also, on a parallel course, bring this before the planning board so that they can start their process. And if there's any additional comments that the select board has, we can make those through the public hearing.
And I still would like to see them separate as well, just add them combined, so we will be able to make that decision at that time, whether or not we send a combined one to town or give the townsfolk an opportunity to do just the cultivation or the retail.
Okay.
So it would be, I think it would be good to see everything together. Awesome.
Thank you again, John. Appreciate it.
Yes, very, very good presentation. Thank you. And next we'll move on to IT Working Group.
Yes. So I asked for this agenda item because I have been exploring a little bit more on the IT side of things and trying to get our infrastructure into a better place. As you know, we had applied for a community compact grant. We had engaged with CBIZ. They were able to provide us an inventory. Prior to that, we worked with the Collins Center for them to give us a more general overview of our IT infrastructure and the services that we receive from a third party in terms of the operation and maintenance. And through that process, I learned that there's a lot of things about IT that I need additional assistance with. So we have been making great strides to formalize, again, an inventory and a process by which we replace items, and we are working with our consultant, BSS, and the president over there, Red Kelly, about also implementing a lot of cybersecurity measures. We've talked a lot about training, and we just received a grant, actually, to move forward with the training through the state for our employees to help become more aware of phishing scams and things like that. And additionally, we are applying for a community compact grant to move forward with I always butcher this as well, but business discovery cyber, the plan for when there's a disaster and something happens. So say you're hacked into the system, you need to have a protocol. How do you inform residents, make sure that tax information is safe, social security information, employee information? How do you alert the public? What are your next steps? Who's the phone tree? Who are you calling? How are we getting the information out? How is the select board alerted? Does that interfere with any of the payment systems? Do residents need to come down and actually have their physical payment with them? Can they pay online? If they can't pay online, there's just a disruption of services and how we effectively manage that crisis situation. And it's a plan that comes together that kind of gives you all of that detail so that you can plan accordingly and make sure that you're working in the best interest of the town, including even contacting your insurance company, because if somebody was to hold information and data hostage and all of that good stuff. So we are working and doing all of those steps to get us into a better position. But on a day-to-day basis and trying to assemble all of the information and decipher and work with our consultants, I was hoping to capitalize on the expertise of one of our board members and create a IT working group so that I can sit down with Red Kelly, the gentleman from BSS, as well as Select Board Member Baker, potentially, and kind of have those conversations as to what we should be looking at. Should we be looking at other programs? Are there other resources we should be taking advantage of? Are there any other best management practices in terms of replacement of infrastructure that we have, or, you know, phasing out of some of the older models that we have, including even just taking a closer look at our software? So doing all of that, and I was hoping to create this kind of working group, not necessarily a committee, because some of the data can be a little bit more sensitive, because we are talking about our network and our systems, and there's some of those types of security measures we need to take, and obviously still allowing for the member to come back to the board and present any findings or discuss anything to make sure that it's open and transparent. But I was hoping that the board might allow me to create such a working group and wouldn't mind appointing Mr. Baker as a member of that working group. So again, I can capitalize on his expertise and his knowledge so that we can keep moving in a positive direction when it comes to IT-related matters.
What do you think about that, Ed?
With me,
Awesome. So we want to fly a motion?
Sure, yeah, I'll make a motion to form a working group to assist the town administrator with information technology. And should I appoint Steve Baker at the same time?
Sure.
Yeah,
why not?
that's part of the working group, right? So it's just him for now?
For now, we were just
Okay.
hoping, again, for transparency purposes, to
Yeah.
let you know that this working group exists and just to put it all out there. Again,
Okay.
there's no votes. Any
Right.
decisions would be brought back to the board
Okay.
if necessary, and serving in an advisory in nature to me and my role.
Okay, nope, that absolutely makes sense. Okay, so make a motion to form the working group to assist the town administrator with information technology infrastructure improvements and long-term planning, and appoint Select Board Member Baker as a member of that working group.
I'll second that. Any further discussion?
Nope.
The only other thing I want to add, I think this is a great idea, because I know it can be really daunting, and I think this will maybe streamline your time a little bit too, so you're not having to Google search terminology and figure it all out. So this was good.
Maybe you can give Mike a call, too. So we'll have a roll call vote. Ed?
yes.
Becky?
Yes.
Jason? Yes. Steve?
Yes.
4, 1 absent.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is the Select Board Policy and Code of Conduct Review.
That one's me.
Yes.
So I just wanted to I asked that this be put on the agenda. I just wanted to let the board know that I had been taking a closer look at our policies and code of conduct, and just in light of some relatively recent Supreme Court, both at the state and federal level decisions, I had a couple of questions, both about from a liability perspective for the town, as well as a personal liability perspective that I had run by the town administrator. After talking about it for a little bit, she had engaged, I believe engaged town council to take a look at some of those questions. So I just wanted to let the board know that that was happening. I don't think we need to do anything else unless there's any discussion, but it was more just to make the board aware that I had raised some concerns.
And I originally also received some direction from the select board at our last meeting to take a closer look at our Facebook and our social media policy. So I had council take a look at that. So in addition to that work, they are taking a closer look at some of the policies and code of conduct that Select Board Member Baker had put forward. So I'm hoping to have that for the board's entire review at their next meeting in March. And then we can then see if there's any additional edits or additional conversations, and then we can enact those accordingly, so that when the board goes forward with their annual review, which per your goals is scheduled to happen in the May timeframe after the election, you'll have updated code of conduct and policies to initiate the new year.
Awesome. Thank you.
One quick question on that. There was select board policies, but then there were two sets, right? Are both of them being looked at, or is it just strictly select board?
So for the matters that Select Board Member Baker brought up,
Yeah.
it was more so the code of conduct and the policy,
Okay.
more so the public comment area of the Select Board policies.
Okay.
For the social media, it was different. The social media policy is actually in our personnel policies and procedures manual.
Okay.
There is no social media policy as part of the document, but it
Mm-hmm.
is referenced in the document itself about use of social media
Okay.
by appointed and elected officials.
Yeah, in essence, if you look at the select board policies,
Yeah.
it basically says that the entire code of conduct applies to social media as well.
Okay.
So it's kind of in addition to the town policy.
Got it. Okay, thank you. I knew there was some overlap, I just wasn't
Yeah.
too sure where that was. Okay.
Any other questions? Ed?
Negative.
I don't have any questions. I'm always. Next is the fiscal year 2027 legislative priorities.
Yes, so every year we receive a lovely email from both our state representative, Adrian Ramos, as well as our state senator, Bruce Tarr, about whether or not we have any budget priorities for the upcoming fiscal year. In the past, we've been able to work with them on some of the special projects. We did receive an earmark or an allocation of about $25,000 from Representative Ramos in regards to 46 Washington Street and advancing the feasibility study, which was coupled with the grant that we received from the Rural Development Fund. So we were very gracious for her for putting aside those monies. We also additionally received some funds from Senator Tarr's office as an earmark and a set aside for the advancement of the Valley Screw property. So we are working with the consultant in order to utilize those funds to do additional testing inside the building. We're currently working with the building commissioner and the owner of the property to see if they will give us rights to enter the building in order to do so and collect those samples safely. We are hopeful that we will be able to do that. That might advance some of our initiatives to try and figure out how we can demolish and reutilize the site. So we have talked about that a little bit, and hopefully if we are able to get those samples, we'll be able to advance those. So as far as this evening, they are looking for us to advise them on any local and state priorities. From the state perspective, I was fortunate enough to attend a fire chief, or the Essex County Fire Chief's legislative breakfast on Friday with Fire Chief Valentine, so I thank him for the invitation. It's always nice to get out there and see other chiefs and also see the delegation here in the Merrimack Valley and beyond. So it's always, again, a great event, and I appreciate the invitation. But it is one of the most frustrating events, like many of the other legislative breakfasts, because the delegation gets up and they talk about some of the bills that the association has put forward as things that they're monitoring or things that are priorities for them, from, second areas of egress to firefighter staffing to additional safety protocols that they would like to see the state legislature pass. And that's great. We're very appreciative for their support. But when it comes down to staffing and whatnot, it's really all about revenue. So the biggest thing that I would like to put forward from their request on a state side is I would really like them to increase the unrestricted government aid. We had talked about this from a larger scale when we reviewed the Massachusetts Municipal Association fiscal outlook that they had provided, the perfect storm. It said that they had not fully funded that particular line since the Great Recession back in 2001. So we're looking to really kind of advocate that they resume funding that to those levels. This latest proposal from the governor only increased that line item 2.5%. So it's not really ideal. We collect about $938,000 from that particular allocation from the state. And we really count on that because as we've discussed on multiple occasions, we can only really increase our tax levy by 2.5% plus new growth. And that's really our new revenue. And then we receive our local receipts, which are ranges from the applications we receive, from marriage, death certificates, fines and penalties, motor vehicle excise. So you're only really looking at about another $1 million there. And then we get about $1 million in state funding. So it's not really a lot when you're adding to our overall budget. So that's one area that I would like to highlight personally. The second area is obviously, as we've talked in the past, about Chapter 70 funding. If they increase Chapter 70 funding, then that gives the school more revenue, which means that that results in less of an assessment to the district or member districts, member communities of the district. There we go. So right now, I believe the proposal is for $50 or $75. I think it's $75 per student. So we're really hoping that they'll increase that. I believe the MMA had mentioned increasing it to $150 per student. And that obviously would go a long way in reducing the assessment for those member communities. So on a state level, the two areas of focus for me at least is the unrestricted government aid and Chapter 70. Additionally, we'd obviously like them to take into consideration Chapter 90, and we'd also like them to take into consideration regional transportation monies. But those are things that we have talked about many a years. So those are the areas I'd like to highlight on those levels. And then from a local priority level, as we've talked about, the Valley Screw Building remains a priority, 46 Washington Street remains a priority, 150 Center Street remains a priority. And I have checked in with some of the other departments. For capital improvements, we have invested in some free cash to look at some of the equipment that the police department needs. The fire department has already initiated grant funding for some of their protective gear that they're looking in the outfitting of some of their fire department members. So there hasn't really necessarily been anything that's been brought forward that falls in the realm of additional funding that we haven't either seen elsewhere or addressed. That doesn't mean that they don't exist. So if there is any other priorities and you agree with some of the items that I listed, I would like to hear from the board as to how and if you would like me to move forward and if there's anything you'd like me to add.
Go ahead, Steve.
No, I mean, at the general level, I agree with both of those. I think they're both really important. Just as you were talking through, especially from the perspective of unrestricted government aid, when we respond to this, can we show them data about like new growth and what the trend is over the last, I don't know, 10 years maybe, so that they can see, you know, I think it went up pretty quickly, but then has kind of started to drop off a little bit, and I think it would be really important to show them that as part of, you know, making a request. And I couldn't agree more on the Chapter 70 funding. Does that includes regional transportation or not?
The student, I'm sorry, which,
The Chapter 70 funding.
no, that's a separate funding.
So that might be the only other thing that I might want to see added, is that they actually fully fund regional transportation, because that's another large cost in the school budget.
Like they're
Agreed.
supposed to?
Yes.
Yes. Put it in the budget so they can actually fund it like they said they would. That would be smart.
And then just one additional question, as far as the local aspect, can we include maybe the dam in that
Yes.
as well?
100%.
That's all I had.
Becky?
He stole my thunder. I was going to say the Salem Street Dam as well, too, especially because it's the next item, and it doesn't look like it's going to hold up for a long time. So, but I agree with what you had mentioned. I think those things would benefit the town, and adding regional transportation is a real sticky point. So I think kind of just addressing that, because it's something that has been off the table for a while. Yeah, like I said, for local Salem Street Dam, adding that I think would be really important. But other than that, I think you're very much aware of what the priorities are for the town. I know you feel it, so thank you.
Ed?
Yeah, just a couple, one's already been mentioned, a couple have been already mentioned. Fund the school transportation to what they originally promised us, the regional school district. Fund fund on this. And one thing that everybody's forgotten, let's see if we can get them to put something in the budget for the water treatment plant that we're going to need.
Is that it, Ed?
Yeah, did you get me?
Yeah, I got it, water treatment plant. It's very important. I agree 100%. I know that in terms of the unrestricted aid, the biggest complaint is it's not keeping up with inflation. So I think if we were to push on that as part of the factor, it may be helpful. But the thing I think I would like to see on the state level is for them to provide a lot more funding for the vocational schools. It's something that they provided 100% funding for when the vocational schools were first introduced. And it's something outside of the normal property taxes ability to pay for with regular high schools and middle schools and grade schools. So I think it's something that they really need to step up and take care of. I know I've reached out to several of the current governor people that are looking to get elected and pushed hard for that, as well as the unrestricted aid. I know they're reviewing the Chapter 70 funding and how it's calculated, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they plan on issuing any more of it. Just how it's distributed out may differ some. So yeah, I agree that is very important as well. Yes, the Salem Dam is extremely important and for a local issue, as well as the old screw factory and the water treatment plant. I know that that's a grant that we have to continue to apply for to get a low interest rate for the 15 million
For the,
water treatment plant. That was the max that we could apply for, or what we originally were approved for.
I'd have to double check, I'm not sure.
But I know it didn't cover the entire, we still had to go out for our standard bond for the remaining. So I'd like to see that, something for that step up, especially since it's important to have the clean water available for everybody. So, and that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, I know it's unfortunate. I know the governor's come forward. I know they've talked a lot about their revenue not being what they had hoped it to be. I know it's a really uncomfortable conversation, but, you know, grants are great. I mean, you know that that's what I do. That's my bread and butter. I love going out for grants, but I feel like if we're in this level of uncertainty when it comes to funding, then giving communities an equitable share of the unrestricted government aid should be the priority. It's always nice to award a community grant. Some communities won't ever see some of those grant funds that they put aside. And, you know, given the dire circumstances we find ourselves in and the fact that they haven't been able to increase that line item, maybe it's time for the conversation to shift in terms of the priorities of funding and how the state funds local municipalities. So it's not always, again, a fun conversation to have, but if that's the reason why they're not able to, then I think we need to start having those really hard conversations to figure out how you get the revenue to the towns.
Yes, stop spending so much on studies. I think that's a pretty good start.
They're important.
Yeah. If they provide a
Maybe a
pathway to go and it actually goes there. But that's beside the point. Anybody else have anything else legislative? No. We'll go on to the Salem Street Dam, review of the recent inspection report.
So I kind of gave the board an update at one of our last meetings about the report. It's finally been issued, so I did want to share that directly with the board. So as we had discussed previously, the dam is still in poor condition, even with the liner replacement, but the liner replacement does give us a little bit more flexibility in timing in terms of us moving forward with the actual repair or replacement. I actually had a really great conversation with GZA today about potentially, and what we hope to do is to apply for another dams and seawall grant for the potential removal of the dam downstream, which would be the Pleasure Pond Dam and Mill Pond Dam. So as we kind of study the area and the hydraulic impact of whether or not we remove and or repair the dam, the downstream side is obviously going to be impacted from sediment, et cetera. So what they were talking about is trying to apply for about $250,000 to take a closer look at those two areas and see what needs to be done in order to remove those particular structures. They're not exactly like this particular structure acting as a dam, so to speak. It does, hold water back per se, but if anyone's been down to the Pleasure Pond Dam, that's right behind 46 Washington Street, that hasn't been full in a very, very, very long time. There are no boards there. There's barely any water there. So trying to take a closer look at that. And then the Mill Pond Dam is a little further up, and it actually runs through private property underneath the driveway as well. So we did have a great conversation about that. We are looking to engage in their services and trying to present a grant application to proceed with that. That does tie into the larger conversation. We are going to be working with Merrimack River Watershed Council to have Matthew Craney come in and talk with the Conservation Commission as well as the Select Board a little bit more about the ecological benefits overall from the watershed perspective, in addition to the fisheries and wildlife that are impacted by the current stream and the current flow of water. So we are continuing to explore this document you have before you. Again, just reiterates that it's all connected. So we are going to have to look at this a little bit more comprehensively. So they are continuing to dive into this, and we are happy to report that again, Slip Liner is performing, and we will be proceeding with a certificate of compliance with the Conservation Commission to close out that project. So otherwise, we're looking good, and I don't know if you've all had a chance to take a closer look at the report. I can try and answer any questions that you have. If not, I can try and bring in GZA to get more specific.
Ed, you got any questions? I think he's frozen again.
It's frozen.
You?
I had just a couple questions. They offer some maintenance recommendations. Is it something Arthur and his team are consistently looking at?
Correct.
Okay. And then the other thing, I know that there's orange barrels still out there.
Yes.
I know it's winter, so I totally get it. But that's the idea is in springtime to
To put the guardrail up.
finish that piece up. Okay.
Correct.
Winter got in the way.
Yes.
Understood.
Where the snow will push that way over.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Okay, that was all I
Steve?
had.
Just one. In the document that they sent over, under the remedial repairs, they talk about how the wall has been buttressed, but that what was done doesn't strictly match their repair drawing. Have we looked at that, and have we had a discussion about what the impact of that is?
So Arthur and GZA have been going back and forth on that point. They would like him to add more rocks. Arthur and his team seem to think that it's pretty solid,
Okay.
and they don't want to further disturb the area. They were moving forward with doing that. I think if you all recall, there were some hiccups with the process in the Conservation Commission, and then we had to stop work. And then obviously winter came, and that didn't allow us to get back out there as well. So they've been going back and forth. There hasn't necessarily been a resolution, but I think, like the report insinuates, it is providing further stability, but the engineers would like it further enhanced.
Okay. So we're still looking at it and trying to figure out a resolution. Fair enough.
Great. And we'll move on to communications and community engagement report.
So this is report number 2, as identified as your select board goals. So I tried to learn from the first report and kind of break it down to more of the figures that might be interesting or more interesting to the board. So the first was the town social media. So this is the report period from December 22nd to February 10th. So it looks like for Facebook, we had a total views of about 63,000. A lot of the users are obviously from the Groveland area, about 73%. We had about 26 new followers, and then we had 2 unfollowers. So there's a net gain of about 24 in that time period. We had 172 reactions. There were 33 comments and 28 shares. And the most generating post that generated the most interest was the National Grid helicopter aerial inspection announcement, which is interesting. Not sure if it was the photo, because there was a pretty neat photo. But that was an attention grabber. So obviously, Facebook seems to be the strongest outreach tool that we have, so we'll continue to utilize that the best we possibly can. And it does show, in fact, that we are reaching outside of our followers and beyond into the Merrimack Valley area. For Instagram, the way their reporting is done is a little bit different, so it's just within the last 90 days. So for total views, we had about 12,000. We had 97% of an interaction from the followers, so liking it or sharing it or what have you. And fortunately, the top performing post was the post about the Bagnell Elementary School bomb threat notification. For this, Instagram is mostly like our immediate followers, those Groveland residents. So we're looking to try and expand our outreach a little bit more, but it still is a tool that people interact with to receive information. For the town website, for active users, we have about 6,320. Total page views was 22,000. The average time per session is about 1 minute and 5 seconds. The traffic sources were a Google search, so just generally typing it into your Google search bar. Then we had Facebook, so if you saw something on Facebook and clicked it, that's about 155 sessions. And then homepage views were directly onto the homepage. They were about 5,842. The visitor locations are, it looks like 18% the Boston area. Then I guess there's a way that you can hide your location, which is about 15%. And then Groveland equated to about 11%. The most visited pages that was requested at the last meeting, so the trash and recycling was the top visited page. Then there was employment opportunities, the pay online, the just general search page, the treasurer and tax collector, the index page, which is essentially the last page on the website that gives you a list of all of the departments, boards, committees, et cetera, the calendar, and then the inspectional services. And then through the Contact Town Hall feature on our website, we received 5 inquiries in this time period, reporting period, and that was 3 related to highway, 1 to the treasurer, tax collector, and 1 to the Groveland Municipal Light Department. So from our observation, people are using the website. They're looking for specific information when they visit our website, which is good. And the time that they're spending, again, are more like driven-oriented searches, which again is a good sign because they're finding what they're looking for. For town hall and in-person engagement, I'm still trying to get a couple of departments on board, but for those that did participate, we have some feedback from the town clerk, we have some feedback from the Council on Aging, the Board of Health, and then my office, and then also the accounting department had also participated. Does not necessarily have a public interfacing department, but when her doors open, people do stop by, and the Board of Health is not always open. So as you can see, most of the inquiries she receives is in regards to the Board of Health. But that is report number 2. I can continue to refine and cater this report specifically to the select board, but I do think this is a little bit more of what you were hoping to receive.
Comments, questions, Steve?
I think it looks great. It's, I think this is really good data to be able to figure out what we're doing that's working and what we're doing that's, maybe needs to be adjusted. I think it would be interesting, and obviously this is kind of a work in progress. It would be interesting to see trends over time and try to track those against things that we're doing differently. So if we post something in a different way and it suddenly has higher engagement, what did we do differently there? Same with, in-person interaction. If we're doing things that are encouraging people to come to town hall to do something, let's see if that's effective, or encouraging them to do it online, if that changes the trends. I'd just like to see that, as we build these reports over time, I'd like to see what that looks like. But I think this is great data.
Becky?
Yeah, just a couple things with the calls for town administrator activity. So it looks like you get a lot that redirect to other departments. So you're kind of the call center, basically?
So we actually, so originally, the phones were always sent to the town clerk's office. So when you called the regular line and you didn't want to go through the directory, you would get the town clerk. The former town clerk had expressed her dissatisfaction with that setup.
Okay.
And when we had created the executive coordinator, well, reinstituted the executive coordinator position, she was adamant that that task be sent on to that role. So that wasn't something that we had done until that position was created, so just about 2 years ago. So now when you dial the main line and you don't want to listen to the directory and you push 0, you get Annie. And Annie will then redirect your call anywhere in town hall based upon whatever it is that you're calling about, whether it's light or something, a marriage certificate or something for the building.
So is Annie just part-time? Is she part-time?
Annie's full-time.
She's full-time, okay, so never mind. All right, that was an interesting thing, because I always thought it would just go to the town clerk, because that's usually
That's usually where it goes.
because most of those redirected calls, are you just sending them to the town clerk's office?
So we do all of it now.
Yeah,
So some of them are clerk-related, but
Okay.
others are, whether it be the select board or whether
Right.
it be, again, a realtor calling about a specific property, so it does fall under the EDPC realm.
Okay.
So, I mean, it'll honestly be a little interesting to track that. And Annie and I have a little spreadsheet where we're doing that,
Okay.
just because it would be interesting, because a lot of the argument originally, and we haven't been able to see it on our side, was that these have nothing to do with me.
Right.
They should be directed elsewhere. So it'll be interesting to see exactly when you pinpoint how many of those calls and which departments they're being directed to.
yes. I know it's just 23 calls, but that time adds up, so I was just curious about that, how that breaks down. The other thing was the takeaway from Facebook data versus Instagram, that the majority of the viewers were like a little over 60% non-followers, meaning that posts are being shared, not actively on the town-owned social media accounts, which is great in one sense, but a potential risk, right? Because now important information, if it's not shared, then residents don't know, right? And that data point right there I found to be really concerning, because their source should be with the town-owned, the town-run social media site. So that number was alarming. I don't know how you get people to be like, no, follow this. This is where things originally are, and this is where you want to get your information. I know that's why we're here. That's why this is our goal, is to see this. But that was an important stat here that stuck out to me. That's all I really had. Thank you.
Ed,
I'm all set, thank you.
as am I.
Can I just
Yes.
ask something? In terms of, you bring up a good point about the number of calls that are kind of redirected. I'm curious, have we looked at how that kind of menu when someone calls in is structured, and whether we have the right things being listed first? Like, if most of the calls are for trash pickup, well, then probably the Board of Health should be the first thing in that call tree, so someone doesn't have to listen to, every other department that they may not want to, just to get to hit the number that they want. Have we looked at that?
So we have, when we redid the phone system, we did take a closer look. But again, when we redid the phone system, that was what, now 4 years ago? So we can double check and take a closer look. So in the next report, I will see what it's listed as and add a section, and then see if it makes sense based upon what we're seeing there and what we're hearing from the phone options, if we.
Yeah, maybe just a small tweak might make a big difference, especially if like the thing we're getting the most calls about is the last thing listed in that call tree. Well, maybe it just needs to be first or second.
Agreed.
No one wants to listen to that menu, right?
0.
Right, 0. That's what I always do. I admit it, yeah.
Yes, that's why a lot of them have disabled that. You no longer have that choice. Well, they change it to something else.
And I would just add to that, I mean, obviously, again, small sample size, so we probably need more data to make changes, but if it's consistently month over month, the same calls that are being redirected, that probably warrants a change.
Yes, I agree. So if we're done with that, then we're going to go on to the FY 2023 to FY 2031 Capital Improvement Plan, review and approval.
So there is an error. It should be fiscal year 2027 to fiscal year 2031. I'm not sure how that happened, but I apologize. So at our last meeting, we went through the capital improvement plan. I had provided you all a link, and I'm hopeful that you had had a chance to take a closer look at it. Tonight, I am asking the board to vote on the actual 5-year plan. At the last meeting, I know that Select Board member Kathy Castronellis had asked specifically about solar on the Town Hall Complex roof project. We did do some due diligence. We did reach out to the roofing contractor. The roof that we're proposing to put on is a 50-year life expectancy, and solar panels, when we did some research, had a 30-year life expectancy. So when we talked to the installer, they had stated that it's put on by brackets, so you wouldn't be putting in any holes or anything into the roof. So first and foremost, you first want to get the roof installed. But better yet, we had a conversation with the electrical engineer, and they said, the panels that we're designing for you, they don't have the capacity for solar. So if you would like to have solar, this project becomes even more necessary, because you wouldn't even be able to add solar into your current system because of the capacity. Now, the new system we're designing doesn't have it either. So we reached back out to them to get some figures. They said that they actually provided us an additional design from the design they already had provided us, and said that it would only really necessarily change the price range $10,000 to $15,000, which is not a make it or break it in terms of what we had allocated for the project. They also suggested making sure that the electrical was done prior to the installation of solar. So based upon that feedback, and also in talking with the general manager over at the Electric Light, we had talked a lot about, that this would actually be a good example of how solar can be beneficial because of our operation. Our operation is during the day. That's when the sun's out. That's when we're collecting the energy. So that's where you can get that break even. We also talked a little bit about battery energy storage, and about how, again, that would be a great opportunity to explore on a smaller scale, how we can take any of the additional excess energy and store it for future use as a backup and/or, again, electricity for the town hall complex. We also talked a little bit more about carports and adding them potentially to the parking lot to add some additional solar options based upon the placement. So after having all of those conversations, it sounds like it's something that we can definitely pursue. It sounds like it's going to be a lot more work in terms of trying to figure out what the cost of the solar is, how it will benefit for us financially, but it does seem that we also have time. And so I'm suggesting that we still move forward with the roof replacement, as well as the electrical upgrades, to include the $15,000 addition to that estimate. And that will then allow us next year to explore solar specifically, so we can see whether or not we have the funds to put that project forward, or if we need to borrow, or if it's just not going to be worth it based upon what design comes up, how many panels we would need, what the cost is, what the generation is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I do think that that would answer the question that was asked, and so I would hope that the select board could move forward with approving the capital improvement plan with that one amendment.
Ed, did you have any questions?
Oh, he's muted.
You're muted.
Not at this time, not at this time.
Becky?
No questions. I'm happy that you looked into it and it wasn't as alarming, maybe price-wise. And it just sounds like this would just be, we have to get this stuff done anyway. It's the foundation that needs to happen, so no questions.
Steve?
I don't have any questions.
The only question I have is regarding the solar, and whether or not you're able to look into the break-even point in terms of time. I know, like I told you before, it's been a long time since I've been in solar, and it was 47 years. So we would never recoup any of the costs of the solar, regardless of the money that would be saved on the cost of the bills, the electric bills, so.
So we did not get an answer yet. We've been reaching out to a couple of solar installers, but since we hadn't been able to get an actual cost of what it would take to actually install, we wouldn't be able to provide you that analysis at
Yeah,
this point in
it's
time.
difficult.
That's why we figured, again, with the 50-year life expectancy versus the 30, we would still have the ability to add solar if it took a year or 2 years, in order to identify and make sure it was in fact the best option for us to move forward. So it didn't lock us into anything.
Yeah, and I do think it's new panel design, because over-designing the panel will allow for any changes in the future, which is something that you don't want to be stuck in a situation where you can't change in the future, or it becomes extremely costly to change in the future. So I don't see that as being a wasted effort. So would somebody want to fly a motion?
Sure. We need the motion with the additional 15,000,
with the additional
and
15,000.
that goes under which line item?
So
The
that would
electrical?
be under the town hall electrical upgrades.
Okay. So I'll make a motion to approve the FY '27 through FY '31 capital improvement plan with additional $15,000 allocated to town hall electrical upgrades.
I'll second that.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? Ed, what you say?
Yes.
Becky?
Yes.
Jason, yes?
Yes.
Steve, yes. 4 in favor, 1 absent. And now we'll move on to the VC Memorial Park update. Review of town council's memo and residential leases and procurement.
So I just wanted to make sure that the select board was fully aware of all of the correspondence and all of the back and forth that was recently had with both town council as well as the Conservation Commission, and just make sure that you were informed. I know that there, in my Monday email, I had provided you a small update, but there was supposed to be a meeting on February 11th. I did have, or I did include in your packet the email that I sent to the board in regards to some of my concerns with some of the votes that they were expecting to take at the meeting. They chose to table the item until they had an opportunity to list them out in a little bit more detail on the agenda. I did also have the opportunity to meet with the subcommittee today that consists of both Mike Dempsey and Stephanie Bartelt, and we had a very productive conversation as to putting together some processes and procedures as to how we move forward with the payment of invoices, procurement, and just public decision-making. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how that conversation will happen with the Conservation Commission. Their next meeting is March, I believe. And at that particular meeting, they'll have an opportunity to discuss everything in a little bit more detail, in addition to the committee, and if they would be on board with kind of like a committee that we had outlined or discussed at our last meeting, or if they would like to do an extension of the subcommittee, or what is it that they would like to do to move forward. And then at that time, we would also maybe like to extend an opportunity to have a joint meeting with both the Select Board and the Conservation Commission, so that together, both of the boards can meet and discuss this, instead of, getting some correspondence here and there from me or their chair, or all that other good stuff, so that we can all kind of be on the same page. So again, this was an agenda item that I had asked just to make sure that you were fully aware of everything in the correspondence that I had been a part of on this issue. So if there's anything specific to anything that I had stated or anything that's presented, I'd be happy to answer that. But again, this was more of an FYI more than anything else.
Have any questions for Rebecca, Steve?
I do not.
Becky?
I just had a couple questions. So I know, with the rentals, it's, something that needs to be worked on. With town meeting being 2 months away and this referencing town meeting, is the expectation that these things would be kind of buttoned up for this town meeting, or do you foresee it being the next? Just that,
So as part of our conversation today, we had talked a lot about what the next steps were specifically with that. We are working with town council on a document that we would need to send to the existing individuals that reside at those locations, and we had talked about this in prior meetings. So hopefully we'll have those draft documents by the end of the week. The attorney that we're working with was in court last week, so he had mentioned getting them to the end of this week. So if that's the case, we'll have an opportunity to explore those and the next steps there. That being said, we still had gone back and forth about the disposition of real property. That's bound under, Chapter 30B in the procurement laws. The authority to quote-unquote dispose of property lies within the select board and the town meeting vote. So we are looking to draft language that would be included on the annual town meeting to allow for those rentals to continue through the proper process, which would be to have a town meeting formally vote to allow for those to be used for rental properties. And then that would initiate us for next steps, and then the authority of the select board to authorize those documents, and whether or not that needs to be through a procurement process, or if due to the terms of the lease might not need to go through a procurement process, but there might need to be another process that's established in terms of deciding who would ultimately be allowed to live at those locations. So, again, we today talked a lot about a lot of different opportunities that we have at our disposal. Originally, I'd reached out to Vanessa Farney, and I think you were all privy to that email where I was like, oh, we can have the Groveland Housing Authority step in and we can make those affordable units. All of a sudden, housing wasn't allowed, and now all of a sudden it could potentially be allowed, and it's not a caretaker's unit, but they need to be invested in the stewardship of the land. So we are working through those details, but we also talked about the desire of the Community Preservation Committee to move forward with an affordable housing trust.
Bless you.
Bless you.
And if they move forward with an affordable housing trust, there could be potential there to work with the trust in order to make those units affordable, and then also tap into CPA funds in order to bring those units up to code. We had talked a little bit about capital improvement projects and monies and how those could be reinvested in the property. But utilizing CPA funds would help offset that, in addition to being smarter about the financial management, not smarter, but would be additional parameters as part of the financial management by like potentially putting aside X amount or percent of the rent to go towards the utilities or the upkeep of the unit, et cetera. So we talked a little about that. Formalizing is a better word of trying to do all of that. My apologies. Because there's been no wrongdoing in that regard.
Right.
So we talked about a little bit of that. So we didn't necessarily establish a pathway forward as much as we all established that, you know, they would like to move forward with the rental units. I believe that the select board would also like to move forward with the rental units. We just want to make sure that it's done legally and correctly.
Right.
So that being said, I believe on the warrant, you will see an article to allow for the disposition of real property for those 3 residential units.
Okay. Thank you. My second question was, I read this like a couple times, but just to confirm, so when they mention like event rentals, like wedding rentals, they are permitted, but did this just say like not through the Conservation Commission? Is that basically what it was?
I didn't, for the DCS email or from
No.
the town council?
From the town council. Where was it? The leases and wedding venues were contemplated at the time of application, and the agreement with EEA requires that the use remain consistent with the application. Yeah, somewhere it mentioned. Maybe I just misread it. I just wanted to be sure that weddings by legal counsel, like that was still on the table.
So for the November 17th correspondence, if
Yeah.
it's part of that one, that was their original one where they were questioning and asking if DCS could
Okay.
clarify as to
Okay.
what they meant by their restriction. They were more so concerned, as you'll see, the 3 residential units in large building located on the site existing
Mm-hmm.
at the time of the grant application. The Conservation Commission has been leasing the residential units and holding weddings on site to raise revenue for ongoing management. Is that the one that you're referring to?
I think so, yeah.
So that's the one where we would have been going back and looking at the actual conservation restriction as well as the agreement and weren't sure, and they
Okay.
just raised the concern.
Okay.
And DCS had issued their response and said that they would be able to do the short-term rentals.
Okay.
Which included weddings and events, birthdays, et cetera.
Right, right,
I
okay.
think their biggest concern was it was so front and center,
Yeah,
where the property should be front and center as a public conservation land for walking.
right,
So I think the website has since been adjusted,
yeah.
so it does include all of that, as well as still trying to build a business to keep it as self-sustaining as possible, which
That's
is
all I
the
have
ultimate
questions.
goal.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Ed, did you have any questions? He's
Oh,
gone.
he's gone.
Bye, Ed. All right. Anything else? All right, so we don't have any appointments or resignations. We do have approval of the minutes. Anybody wants to file any motions for those?
Can we do them all together, or do you need to do them separately?
I was not here for the 22nd, so I'll have to abstain.
Okay, so why don't we I'll make a motion to approve the December 8th, 2025, January 5th, 2026, and January 20th, 2026. meeting.
I'll second that.
Motion is second. Any further discussion?
No?
All in favor? Aye.
Yeah.
We'll have to table the 22nd if Ed's not here, right? There's not three of us to go.
Yes,
Okay.
So which one was that, the 22nd?
22nd. We'll have to push that forward to the next meeting. And we still have the committee board template for the Recreation and Town Study Committee.
Yes, and I believe that will be done in March. There's been some back and forth. I know there was some confusion with the town study committee, but I believe it's been resolved. I've been trying to,
Correct, yeah, I went to the last meeting study committee, just as a resident, I guess. And they did ask a few questions about it, so clarified a few things. I think they're good there, and I don't think the Recreation Committee has met,
I don't believe
Recently.
so.
but I know that I've spoken with the chair of the Recreation Committee, and it is something that he plans to put on the agenda next time they meet.
We're still in
Ultimately,
progress.
We can ultimately set it up for them.
Yeah, I
If
think the
need be.
biggest thing is just getting their feedback on like the mission. I think most of that document is pretty standardized across boards, aside from maybe like the size and how frequently they meet. But the rest was more just general guidelines, but we could certainly set their mission for them.
But regardless, now it's town administrator update time.
So I only have a few updates, like I usually tell you. So the first and foremost, the Pawtucket Regional School fiscal year 2027 budget update. As you all know, there is going to be a school committee meeting on February 24th. If anybody is going to attend, please let me know so that I can inform the executive assistant over there of attendance. The finance board was also invited. In regards to kind of my notes on that, and I know we'll probably have a discussion on our next agenda after that meeting so that we can figure out exactly how the school committee intends to move forward. But originally, their proposal included a 6.3% increase to the overall fiscal year budget for 2027. That was the budget book that you received electronically. So that actually led to a projected increase of approximately 7% of the operational assessment for the town of Groveland. So that means increasing from $11.9 million to $12.8 million. They, at that meeting, as you saw from the email that I sent over to the superintendent, and he also responded that at that meeting, they had stated they were going to be reducing the overall assessment by $825,000, and that would be a conversation that would lead to a less likely override for the town of Groveland. The percentage increase for Merrimack with the 825 reductions would be a 2.92% increase from their operating assessment, a 4.42% increase from the operating assessment for the town of West Newbury, and for the town of Groveland, it would be a 4.8% increase. After taking a look at that figure, I had requested that the superintendent and business manager also consider reducing an additional $250,000 from the overall assessment, which would bring the town of Groveland down to an even 4% increase over last year's overall assessment. As we've talked about multiple occasions and a little bit this evening, we have an FY27 revenue estimate. It's actually, I just redid it based upon some of the updated figures, so it's a little under $25 million. The PRSD assessment alone, that includes the capital and the operating, would account for approximately 60% of Groveland's total operating budget. That does not include the assessments for Whittier Regional as well as the Essex Tech North Shore Agricultural School. So after taking that into consideration, that leaves approximately $9.9 million of funds for us to divvy out to all of the municipal services here in town. So it's not exactly an ideal situation. We can sustain an approximately 3.3% increase in the school assessment. So again, asking for 4% is still not going to put us in a position where we can do everything that we would like to, but it at least doesn't decimate our budget. But at the same time, given the fact that we have made great strides in our operating budget because we've constantly felt the strain to open up funds. So we've gone above and beyond with trying to renegotiate our trash contract and bring it into an automated pickup instead of manual. We're trying to implement the tonnage control, new carts. We moved to the North Shore Regional 911, tried to cut down costs there. We've been very good about trying to strike formal agreements with our departments, such as the Groveland Municipal Light, to formalize the revenue that we take in there, the indirect costs that we take in from the Water and Sewer Department, and formalizing that and making sure we're capitalizing on revenues. We've been really trying to do the most we possibly can to free up any monies that we can find from an operating standpoint. And with the allocation, you're essentially seeing additional revenue at $73,000 for the entire fiscal year. So obviously, that will require us to have to take a closer look at the budget. Because of some of the savings that we were able to implement from an operational standpoint, we might find ourselves in a situation where we can still provide a 2% cost of living increase to our employees and essentially fund services to its current level. We're hoping that we can do so and to avoid any layoffs. We're looking at first not filling any vacant positions and kind of backing into it that way to see what we can make happen. But we won't know for sure until the school decides to set the assessment of what that does to our budget. We can talk about whether or not the board would like to consider an override. If we're looking at what the requested departments, or the request put forward by the department, the fire department did put forward a request for 2 additional firefighters. We had talked about potentially looking at a part-time assistant accountant. We had talked about the fact that this year is an election year, so the town clerk's budget will see an increase, whereas next year it will not see as much of an increase because of the fact that the elections are not annual. So regardless of what we do, it will not be an operation, it will not be a school override. Because both Merrimack and West Newbury, from what I understand, would be able to handle the allocation in their operating budget, we are forced to accept whatever assessment they provide us. So if we needed to go for an override, it would need to be an operational override. I do think that we could potentially make the adjustments within our budget. Again, that would not be without sacrifice, but there is a way for us to work with the additional savings, but recognize that everything that we've worked for so hard for the last 2 years is non-existent and has gone to cover the school assessment and does not go back into the operating budget, does not go back into the operating budget of the town. I think my biggest frustration is in recent correspondence, and I believe you were copied on it. I do know that I sent it over to the school committee members for Groveland at least, is that the school business manager as well as the superintendent has said that they will consider reducing their assessment by the $250,000 additional, but they would like to see our line item budget, and they would like to see our line item budget for the last 3 years to figure out where we've added positions, taken away positions, et cetera. And that necessarily didn't sit well with me. Public education is a function of municipal government. You use taxpayer dollars to fund public education in addition to providing monies for public works and also for all of the other features that municipal government is there to support. I understand that it's not always easy to make sacrifice, but at the same time, you're leaving us with, again, under $9 million to operate an entire town and taking over 60% of our operating budget. I understand they're dealing with tough times as well, but to go and make a divisive comment about looking at our budget to see and justify any additional expense cuts on their end is not necessarily something that I support. And I express my frustration and my dissatisfaction with the fact that that's exactly where they went. As you'll also note in the email from the superintendent, he had mentioned that this is the least stressed he's been as part of a budget process, which again was something that did not sit well with me, given the fact that he's had to cut about $1.4 million from his budget annually for a reason. They've created a structural deficit with one-time funds being the ESSER funds as well as their E&D, which equivalents to their free cash. The reason they don't have to cut the 1.4 this year, as they've had to do in prior years, is because the enrollment for Merrimack is down. So they've lost 12 students at the high school, and we've gained 12 students in the elementary side. And I understand from a per pupil perspective, we need to pay more because we have more students there. But at the same time, that's not naturally a normal thing that happens for Merrimack. Merrimack and Groveland tend to find themselves in the same situation. So the fact that they don't this year doesn't mean that next year the tables won't turn. They have new developments on the horizon as well, and so do we. So it is one of those things where it becomes a little bit unequitable when we start talking about the formula where all it takes is two communities to be fine to literally take away the choice of another community. And this is not a new conversation, but I do feel as though, again, it brings it to the forefront that we can't just claim to be transparent by saying that the state made this problem and the state won't fix their Chapter 70 formula. Yes, that is very much the case, but we all play a part in this. And so we all need to have really hard discussions. And sometimes if we don't want to go back to the voters to ask them for money, then the answer is no, and we have to make those cuts. And so the same must apply for the school side of things. So it'll be interesting to see how things progress, but the initial overview, without some of the things that we've done this last year, we would be in a lot worse of a situation. So we'll continue to monitor, we'll continue to see what we have for our assessments. The GIC still hasn't come in with theirs. We put in about an 11% increase over last fiscal year. We did have our Whittier went down slightly. I think we lost 1 or 2 students. And then obviously we can project because we can only, due to the lottery, have 11 students. So we should be in good shape from the Whittier perspective, and they're not looking for any capital improvement funds beyond what they need. So there's a good sign there. And then additionally, we've taken a closer look at the Essex Tech allocation as well, and that will come down. Because if you remember last fiscal year, they had talked about just adding like a lump sum for their special education, and that was determined not to be allowed. So our assessment last year was higher just because we didn't know how that was going to unfold. So taking a closer look at that and the student enrollment, we could probably bring that down about $50,000 in addition to the Whittier budget. So that's $100,000 of savings that we don't typically get to recoup at times, given the actual enrollment figures. So again, this year, a lot of things worked in our favor where we were saving some money, but now, again, that means that we can't do anything other than try and do the bare absolute minimum in order to make sure that we don't have to go back to the voters for any additional monies, which is, again, I think the top priority, at least that's my top priority. I don't think that people want to see an override. I don't necessarily think it would pass either, but it might be something that the board would like to do, and if that's the case, we can definitely explore that a little bit more. So at our next meeting, hopefully we'll have some more information and a better direction from the school committee as to what they would like to do. Again, the business manager and the superintendent provide the budget to the school committee. The school committee ultimately votes. I don't believe they will be voting at that meeting, but they will be voting at their following meeting, is my understanding. Once they vote, I will be able to present the budget book to the town. But again, I want to make sure that we have all of our figures buttoned up so we don't have multiple different versions that we're looking at when we're trying to figure out if we balance at the end of the day.
Right.
Then I just wanted to let you all know town hall access upgrades. So as you know, we moved over to the North Shore Regional in December. So we do have somebody covering the front desk from time to time. Some of the part-time dispatchers have been filling in, but only for the day shift until we find somebody to fill that position. But that means that if you had the recreation committee meet, they don't have access to the building because they're not staffed by anybody. Like the planning board has the town planner, the conservation has the conservation agent, the select board has myself. So there's nobody to let individuals into the building. They used to go over to the dispatch since it was 24 hours, check out a key, they would lock up and then give the key back to the dispatch. So as we look at the lock system over next door for PD, when there's an emergency situation, the door will be locked. There's a way to also have a fob system in there, so if the officer comes and there's an emergency, they just have to get the fob there, or it's on their belt. It's really easy. They can open and access the door. There's a way to extend that and use something similar over here at Town Hall. So we can give out fobs, and there's a better security measure because you can deactivate them. They're easily bought. It's not like the current keys that we have. Like if you have one of those go missing, you're talking about $50 to replace a key. So it should help us with an audit tracking. It should also help us with rules and controls so we can make sure that the doors lock at a certain time. We could have them only open for 2 hours. So there's certain things that we can do behind the scenes that will really help, and it all ties into the same system. So the system over at PD will tie into here. So it's something that we're looking forward to, because then we can just give out the fob, and then again, if we need to, they return it. If they can't, then we can deactivate it, and it's no big loss. And then also, as we had alluded to when we were talking about VZ Memorial Park, the community preservation is going to be receiving a presentation from the consultant who had moved forward with the Affordable Housing Initiative project. And they will be talking a lot about an affordable housing trust and the creation of an affordable housing trust. They also did explore the idea that we were going to be able to use CPA funds for a repair program. They found that they are not going to be able to do a program because it's not allowed. But they did provide some additional information on how we could utilize those funds with an affordable housing trust to do a loan program or a buy-down program or other types of repairs on affordable housing units. So they will be presenting to the community preservation at their March meeting, and then we will be taking that information and sharing it with the select board. And if the community preservation committee would like to move forward with the bylaw, we'll be putting that before the select board to also review. And then I just wanted to thank the assessing manager and the Council on Aging director, Alyssa Lee and Julie Yeba, for doing the tax relief options for Groveland homeowners. There was a presentation that the COA put on, and Julie Yeba gave a presentation on all the different abatements and exemptions that homeowners could apply for. And then I have the permits, meetings, and administrative actions, procurement, projects that are still in process, the grants, and the financial snapshot. As you'll see, again, technology is the biggest concern. We're at 77%. Otherwise, everything seems to be tracking pretty much on cue. The building inspector is a little high, but at the same time, we had talked about there being a grant and the not splitting it into fiscal years, but we actually found out that there was some error in accounting there. The building commissioner was separating out his match from his actual grant allocation, which is not the way we're supposed to be doing it. Once we get a grant contract, we set it aside that this is the entire grant. So if there is a match, the accountant takes money from the account and puts it into that one account. So he was drawing from another account. So when he went to go close it out, she's like, "But you have all this money." And he's like, "No, that's my match. I already spent it." And it's like, no, it's in the grant account, so it actually worked out. So he shouldn't be as low as he thought he was going to be, so that was a good sign. So again, otherwise, the budget is trending on schedule. There is a list of the grants, and then there's the meetings, events, and seminars that I've attended in the last 2 weeks. We did have a lot of PD clerk interviews, so that took up the majority of my time. But if there's any questions that you have in regards to any of those meetings and or anything else in the document, I'd be happy to answer it.
Steve?
2 questions. For the building access, just given that it's getting into a very busy time of year for boards and committees as we get ready for town meeting, do we have some procedure in place so that when a meeting is posted, the chair of a particular board knows to reach out to someone to get access? Or how are we handling that so that it's consistent and we don't have meetings getting canceled or delayed because people can't get in?
So once a meeting has been posted with the clerk, we've been, Annie more so has been working with Jen to figure out what's on the agenda, and then we've been working with the chair and or a representative that we know will be at another meeting. I think you were the culprit of one of them with the Groveland baseball. We're like, "Oh, we know you're gonna be there. Can you take the key tonight for Tuesday?" So we've been trying to do that and make sure that those individuals are either gonna be in the building so that they can return it and we can make sure it's accounted for. So right now, it's just been kind of reactive. But we can sit down and take a closer look and see if there's a way for us to be a little bit more proactive with the schedule and reach out to the chairs and just,
Yeah, that was gonna be my suggestion, is maybe just reach out to all the boarding committee chairs and just say, if you're scheduling a meeting after hours,
we can do
please
that.
request a key, so that it, they can take some responsibility to get, to put that request in. And then the only other question I had was just any updates on the trash and recycling contract?
And them to have the key. Sorry. So, We had a great conversation. I think we already discussed that we were sitting down and talking with Mello Disposal Corp. About a contract. We have most of the terms of the contract already established and drafted. We are looking to finalize one component of the contract in terms of the final draft. So the final component was more so the recycling. As the way that we've negotiated with the hauler is that we will get what he gets charged from the Casella in terms of the recyclables, so there's no upcharge, there's no, above 50, we get this and they get that, so it's a little bit more streamlined, but it is a variable price. So we're just looking to lock down that language since it does change, but will never really necessarily exceed a set fee. So we're finalizing that. Then once we finalize that, it will go over to town council just to confirm that we've done everything. We've already kind of consulted with them prior to on the actual template that we use, that we took from the state as well as from the town of Boxford and also Topsfield. So we're good there, but we want them to give it one more final read. Because it's a 5-year contract, it will need to go to town meeting for approval. And so I just want to make sure that I'm okay with town council with sharing what I've negotiated to see whether or not there needs to be any changes, and we can do that prior to town meeting, or if I have to wait and still use that as a placeholder in terms of the budget and what we've already allocated. Right now, we're looking at, again, because of the variable with recycling, we're on a little bit of the high side, but we're looking at about an estimated savings about $90,000 from last fiscal year. So once I get confirmation from town council, I'll be able to hopefully share that document with you.
Great, thank you.
Becky?
Nope, I have nothing.
Road, you, Ed?
Just a couple of comments on the school budget. If the school is asking for what employees the town has added in the last 3 years or cut, do the same thing to them. Ask them for the employees that they've added in the last 3 years and what they've cut and the salaries of each individual that they've hired. And I think that's only fair to do.
Anything else?
That's it.
That's it?
No, that's it.
I don't have any questions for you. So we'll move on to select board time and reports. Becky?
I have nothing this week.
Steve?
Nothing this week?
Ed?
Nothing.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a quiet group.
I have something from the Friends of VC. Admission is free. They'll have refreshments and games at the Winter Festival. Learn about wild winter mammals for all ages, presented by North Shore Nature Programs, February 22nd, 12 p.m. to 3 p.m. Engaging, kid-friendly, learn to identify tracks, understanding, and coexisting. Through real animal artifacts, hands-on activities, and short hike, participants will explore what makes mammals such a fascinating and important. So I recommend going. There'll be 2 back-to-back sessions, 1:45 and 1:45 to 2:30. And if you have any questions, there's a telephone number you can call, which I believe is all posted on the website.
Is it going to snow on Sunday for the Winter Festival?
I hope so. It would make it,
Wintry?
yes, wintry. Nostalgic. So I think we're ready for a motion. No, correspondence. National Grid notice of filing, public hearing, and request for comments, February 2nd. They're looking for a big increase, from what I understand. Again, which they just had. So I definitely recommend everybody speak up and go there. This information is also found on our website, correct? I definitely recommend that, because that's a bit crazy. Looking for waivers as well. Looking for waivers on how they do things and whether or not they need to go for a competitive bidding process. So I do recommend that. Everybody show up for that. I can't attend. Or actually, I think you should make it a priority to attend. Yes.
They have, that hearing is March 20th, I think?
Yes.
Could we put that on the town calendar?
I believe it is, but I'll double
Okay. I may have
North-
missed it.
North Shore Superintendent Roundtable 2025-2026 Legislative Priorities, which I think we covered some of that. And the appointment of Brady Palladino to the fire department as a full-time firefighter. And our next meeting will be Monday, March 2nd, 2026 at 6:30. Now we're ready to adjourn. If somebody would like to motion for such.
Make a motion to adjourn at 8:22 PM.
I will second that.
All right, well, we'll roll call out since Ed is back. Ed?
Yes.
Becky?
Yes.
Jason, yes. Steve?
Yes.
And we are adjourned. Thank you very much, Groveland.